Today is going to be a collection of topics that is always good to know about if you're going to be a presiding officer. And then we have a series of questions which have been forwarded to me, which I will do my best to answer when we get to the end of the class. The first topic is on amending the bylaws, which is critically important because the bylaws are the governing body and you want them to be relatively stable, and you want to make sure that everyone is in agreement, not everyone, but that you have a supermajority in agreement of the changes that you make. So a motion to amend the bylaws is a special case of the motion to amend something previously adopted. That's because you have a except for the first adoption, you have an existing document, and so you're always amending it to improve it or make changes to reflect what's going on in your organization. The motion to amend the bylaws is a main motion subject to the same rules as other main motions with the following exceptions. Special requirements should be in the bylaws around prior notice and requiring a 2/3 vote. And again, this is one of the areas where I get a little frustrated with Robert's Rules of Order because I like rules to be crisp, and there are areas where they use the word should. And so here they say you should have requirements in the bylaws for prior notice and a 2/3 vote. I've just finished working with an organization that has in their bylaws that the changes and the bylaws can be made by a majority vote, which if that's what they agree to, they can do. But Robert's Rules recommends that it be a 2/3. And then amendments are limited to the extent of the change for which the notice was given. So if you have given a prior notice to like changing the authority of the presiding officer or the president of your organization, you can't then move to also amend the role of the secretary or something else. You have to do a separate prior notice. And unlike other motions, you cannot reconsider a bylaw. So when you change a bylaw, the change is made and you can't rescind it. It has to, even if you're going to be changing it back to what it was previously, you have to follow the same process of prior notice and changing the language back to what it was. So there's several kinds of changes that can be made to bylaws. The most common one is isolated changes. And these can be treated as any motion to amend something previously adopted. There is a format for making isolated changes that is what I use. The main thing is that the motion be very crisp for amending it. And so you use the words like striking out and inserting so that you have in your minutes a record of the bylaws change itself. So there's no one creating the bylaws from a concept that was passed, which I've seen done in organizations. You want the exact word of the motion agreed upon by the body reflected in the bylaws when the change is made. My favorite way to present bylaws changes is called the 3-column format. And it includes a good format for this includes like a title and a number for it. So you can say this is change 2022.01, so everyone understands what they're referring to, and a title, and then maybe a summary statement on what is being changed. And you could include a purpose, like, to improve the administration of the organization or whatever is trying to be achieved by the change. And then the actual motion itself, so that everyone understands what the specific change is that's being proposed. And then the best part is that you have the current wording in the bylaws, the proposed amendment where you have the removed language stricken through, and the added language indicated like with bold and italic, and if you're able to color, just so everyone understands what is being taken out and what is being put in. And then the third column is, if adopted, how it will read. Now, given the fact that you can probably amend a bylaws proposal during the meeting, then that would change if someone added amendment to the proposed change. Sometimes bylaws have been neglected for an extended period of time, and so the whole thing is due for a tune-up. And this is a very tricky area to go into, because it's fine if you have an organization where everyone trusts everyone, but if you have an organization where there is mistrust and then there's suspicion around what you're trying to do when you change the bylaws, then it starts becoming a little bit more dicey, because bylaws are all about the allocation of power. And so there could be a tug of war over how the changes in the power distribution is allocated. A revision of the bylaws or a lengthy amendment of more than one section should be considered by paragraph, as described in section 28. And I'm going to talk about what that process looks like. So when you consider by paragraph, it can be applied to the main motion and amendments as appropriate. It's out of order when another has the floor. Of course, it must be seconded. It's not debatable. It is amendable, and it requires a majority vote to change the proposed amendment. But the adoption still requires whatever is specified in the bylaws. The rules of debate change a little bit when you debate things by paragraph. So if you've got 4 paragraphs that are being revised, you consider the first paragraph, and then once everyone has agreed to it, you move to the next one. And if you remember, we earlier talked about limits on the ability of members to speak, and that your default the default limits are no more than twice on a topic for 10 minutes. You might have special rules that say that you can't speak for more than 3 times for 2 minutes, or whatever your special rules are. When this applies to a circumstance like this, where you've got like 4 paragraphs to consider, your rights then apply to the debate on each paragraph. So if your special rules is you can't speak more than 3 times for 2 minutes, then you debate that first paragraph, and then when you go to the next paragraph, everyone's rights reset. So you have another opportunity to speak up to 3 times for the maximum allowed. It's not like you can exhaust all of your opportunity to speak in the first paragraph and then you have to be silent for the remainder. That's not the way this works. So everyone has the ability to speak on every paragraph that is being proposed. And then no vote is taken until there has been an opportunity to review the entire proposed change. So if you've got 4 paragraphs of changes, you have to give everyone an opportunity to review and amend each of the 4 paragraphs, and then you take a vote on the final amended document if amendments were applied. Even though you might have 4 paragraphs and you've gone through the first 3 and you're on the 4th one, you still keep all of the paragraphs open for amendment until you've taken a final vote, because it is possible that you have a change in the 4th paragraph that then has to be reflected in something in the previous 2 or 3 paragraphs. And so in that case, you can go back and amend the previous paragraphs if they need to be made consistent. And procedurally, the way it should work is that the first subdivision is read. So if you've got 4 paragraphs, you read the first paragraph. It's explained by the proponent of the change on why you're doing it. The chair asks, is there any debate or amendment to this paragraph? And then when there's no further debate or amendment to the first paragraph, then the chair moves on to the next one, and it's read and it's explained until you reviewed all of the proposed changes. And then after all the parts have been considered, the chair then opens the entire document to one final round of amendment. And at this point, people can also make further changes if they so wish. And then when debate is exhausted, the vote is taken on the entire motion. So you amend the paragraphs and then you end up with your final amended document. And then that's when you take your final vote based on the requirement of the bylaws. So if it's a 2/3 vote, then that would require a 2/3 vote to accept all of the changes that have been discussed. They take effect immediately. And so if you have a series of bylaws changes lined up, you have to make sure that you don't have any interdependencies amongst the changes that you'll be reviewing. Otherwise, you might have an instance where you have changed something and then it's invalidated a subsequent change, and then you have to postpone that for the next meeting. Because if you have any changes, the changes take effect immediately. It's important to give proper notice. So again, this is where they use the word should. Notice of a bylaws amendment should be in the format worded in a form such that to amend Article 4, Section 2 by striking out March and inserting April after the word second Tuesday in. So someone reading the amendment can understand what the language of the resulting bylaw is going to be changed, is going to look like. And when the notice has been given of a bylaw amendment, it becomes a general order for the meeting to which it is going to be considered. You can have a proviso where where your changes can be postponed to take effect or do something else. I wrote a bylaws change just yesterday because we have this issue about in a caucus, there's been no cleansing of the membership rolls for 20 years. And so there's actually people who are no longer around on the membership roll. And so the bylaws change is going to require everyone to re-register every other year in January. However, I've added a proviso where in the month after these changes are adopted, we will do a one-time cleansing of the roll so we can get an accurate count of who's a member inside this organization. So you can have a proviso that says, like these changes to the president's responsibilities will take effect after the election of the next president, or whatever trigger mechanism you wish to have for that. The proviso does not go into the bylaws. It's just a governing sentence about when the changes take effect. Cool. The next one is on appealing the ruling of the chair, which is one of the most dramatic aspects of Robert's Rules of Order. I've seen chairs get insulted because someone has appealed a decision they made, but this is what Robert's Rule says about it. If a member disagrees with a ruling of the chair affecting any substantial question, they should not hesitate to appeal. The situation is no more delicate than disagreeing with another member in debate. In the case of serious questions, when proponents and opponents appear to be nearly equal, a presiding officer may welcome an appeal from his decision by relieving the chair of the responsibility in a strongly contested situation and placing it on the assembly itself. Better relations are often preserved. So if you're the presiding officer and you have this contested issue, you can just move the decision to the membership itself and let them decide, and then they don't hate you for your ruling because you've let the majority of the membership come up with a decision to break a tie or whatever is being discussed. This is a motion that can be made from the floor. Any two members have the right to appeal from the decision of the chair. And the next line is very interesting. Members have no right to criticize a ruling of the chair unless they appeal from the decision. So they can't go off and gripe about a decision that the chair has made and just stir up malcontent. As I've said in previous meetings, democracy is a participatory activity, and so if you don't like something that the chair has done, you need to appeal it during the meeting itself. Otherwise, you need to just to limit it. The motion to appeal takes precedence over any question pending at the time the chair makes a ruling. It can be applied to any ruling by the presiding officer, except that when the chair rules on a question about which there cannot possibly be two reasonable opinions, an appeal would be dilatory and is not allowed. And this is a bit of a difficult concept to wrap your head around. If the chair has ruled to do something that is contrary to the bylaws, then that is not appealed. That is when you say, point of order, I believe that such and such, and then the chair has to adhere to the rules. If you have a chair that doesn't adhere to the rules, then you have a completely different problem, and there's a different way to deal with it. Appealing the ruling of the chair is where you have areas of ambiguity, where there is a room for interpretation, and you've disagreed with the way the chair has interpreted it. And we have a script that we're going to go through on a situation that I encountered that was ambiguous, and even though I have an opinion about it, hopefully it'll illustrate how this process works. The motion to appeal the decision is in order when another has the floor, but it must be made at the time of the ruling, and it also must be seconded. So you can't wait for the next meeting and appeal the ruling of the chair from a previous decision. It has to be done during the meeting in which the ruling was made. And it's debatable, but it has special rules of debate. Please start.
Is there any new business? The chair recognizes Colonel Mustard.
Request for information.
Please state your request.
Has the chair established a committee for creating the delegate selection plan for the upcoming state delegate selection conventions?
Yes, the chair created a special committee and has appointed Ms. White as the committee chair. The committee began work last month.
Point of order.
Please state your point.
The bylaws clearly state that the Rules Standing Committee has the duty to write convention rules. In addition, the parliamentary authority states in paragraph 5010 that a special committee may not be appointed to perform a task that falls within the assigned functions of an existing standing committee.
The point is not well taken. The delegate selection plan is not rules. I checked with prior chairs, and it has been traditional for the chair to appoint a special committee to do this work.
I appeal from the decision of the chair.
The decision of the chair is appealed from. The chair will explain the reasoning behind the ruling. Each member may speak once in debate on the question, and the chair is allowed a final statement. The question is on whether the delegate selection plan are rules and would therefore belong to the Rules Committee. I base this ruling on similar decisions of past chairs. The delegate selection plan is a lengthy document of goals and direction from the DNC. Convention rules are what are approved at the beginning of a convention. There are clearly two types of documents, and it is completely within my power to appoint a special committee. Colonel Mustard, do you wish to speak first?
Yes. The DNC issued a document to guide each state in the creation of their delegate selection plan. Although it is lengthy and detailed, it is nevertheless the rules for the convention to which the state delegate selection plan must comply. The delegate selection plan is a set of rules for the delegate selection convention. The bylaws clearly state that rules to conventions belong to the Rules Committee. There is no ambiguity, so this shouldn't even be an issue to appeal. I urge you to reject the chair's ruling and vote no.
Is there any further debate? The chair recognizes Ms. White.
I agree with the chair. If this is how we have always done it, then that is the way we should continue.
Is there any further debate? The chair recognizes Professor Plum.
As a member of the Rules Committee, I know how complicated rules can be. A special committee composed of the chair's special members bypasses the duly elected members of the Rules Committee. Members of this assembly should be exceedingly displeased to hear that your elected representatives have been pushed aside and replaced by appointees that were not approved by this body.
Is there any further debate? The chair recognizes Mrs. Peacock.
Once again, the chair is violating the bylaws of this organization. The bylaws are clear. As the parliamentary authority states in paragraph 225, if a customary practice is or becomes in conflict with the parliamentary authority or any written rule, and a point of order citing the conflict is raised at any time, the custom falls to the ground, and the conflicting provision in the parliamentary authority or written rule must thereafter be complied with.
Is there any further debate? The chair believes that the special committee is valid and that the work of the special committee does not duplicate the assigned duties of the Rules Committee. The question is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Vote aye if you agree with the chair's ruling. Vote no if you disagree with the chair's ruling. Those in favor of sustaining the chair's decision, say aye. I'm waiting for Ms. White.
Sorry. Aye.
Those opposed to the chair's decision say no.
No,
No.
The noes have it, and the chair is overruled. The chair will dissolve the special committee and assign the writing of the delegate selection plan to the Rules Committee.
I want to say a few words about the role of a parliamentarian because sometimes they're given greater authority than they really should. The parliamentarian is a consultant, commonly a professional who advises the president and the other officers, committees, and members on matters of parliamentary procedure. A parliamentarian's role during a meeting is advisory and consultative one, since the parliamentary law gives to the chair alone the power to rule on questions of order or to answer parliamentary inquiries. Sometimes you see chairs turning to the parliamentarian and asking the parliamentarian to speak on something and then say, well, the parliamentarian says this is so, and then treat it like, you know, it's words from above. Ultimately, though, the parliamentarian is advising the chair, and the chair can take that advice or not. During a meeting, the work of the limited to giving advice to the chair and when requested to any other member. It is also the duty of the parliamentarian to call the attention to the chair to any error in the proceedings that may affect the substantive rights of any member or may otherwise do harm. It is not cool for a parliamentarian, because they're being paid by the chair, to give biased opinions in the chair's favor. The parliamentarian still should be there to ensure that the rules of democracy are being followed. And so if something is being done that abbreviates that, then they need to bring it to the attention of the chair and get it corrected. If they don't do that, then they could actually be turned in to the National Association of Parliamentarians if they're a member for a breach of conduct.